Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, May 9th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 117 days. The game against Michigan in 201 days. We are continuing our post-spring look at the position-by-position tour around the Ohio State football depth chart. Today, we're talking tight ends. What with this being the year of the tight end, might be the most important show we do all year long, which is why we brought in our good buddy Kevin Noon of BuckeyeHuddle.com to talk about it. Kevin, I guess let's start with why we see tight ends on the field for Ohio State so frequently. If you're putting tight ends in the field, you're either pulling running backs or wide receivers off the field, and they are loaded and very talented at running back. They are loaded and very talented at wide receiver. So what's the point of pulling some of those guys off the field to put tight ends on in Ryan Day's offense?
Yeah, you're putting a big body on the field that can help you in various ways. And while the one that we all notice the most is pass catching, that's not necessarily always the most important reason that you have a tight end out there. I mean, they can be an additional blocker in terms of what you're doing with your pass pro. They can be somebody who's involved in your run scheme as well. There are just a lot of opportunities for a tight end to make an impact where you're not necessarily even calling their number, because when you're watching a game, you're focused on where the ball is, and if the ball isn't in their hand, you're not going to necessarily notice that Cade Stover has gone there and been able to pick up a guy on the second level to spring the running back. So there's a lot of opportunities for the tight end to have an impact that's beyond catching the ball. I mean, obviously, we love to talk about how many receptions this guy has and how many receptions that guy has, but I think Ohio State running the 12, which is one back, two tights, is something that we've become quite familiar with.
And, we have this recurring bit that it's the year of the tight end, and every year is the year of the tight end at Ohio State. And the joke is it never really kind of arrives. This is like Linus waiting out on the field for the great pumpkin. You can wait every year and it never really happens. This year, though, feels like it might kind of be the year of the tight end, sort of in the way that you were talking about there, because if you're not 100% confident in your tackles to pass block or run block or whatever your concern is with your tackles, having an extra body out there might just even to chip, to help out, a little block and go, whatever it is, might give you a little bit of an extra, just a little bit of extra security there at the tackle spots. Is that something you think we might see more tight end this year, just to sort of help out those tackles, whether it's run blocking or pass pro?
I think certainly at first, with two of the first four games on the road, one being a league game, one being a Power 5 game with Notre Dame. I think that as Ohio State is trying to figure out if it has the right five guys out there on the offensive line, it might be best to have the two tights out there. Whether or not you're sending one out more as an offensive weapon and you're keeping one home to shore up some issues there. I mean, even when Ohio State had a very good offensive line, we still saw a lot of 12 personnel. So I don't think seeing less tight end is on the table. It's going to be equal or more. And I tend to think it's going to be a little bit more as they're trying some new things. And let's not forget as well that, at least in label, Brian Hartline is the offensive coordinator, and maybe he's got some opinions of what he thinks about 12 personnel and how things should go there. And, ultimately, I think a lot of it, too, comes down to what the personnel is. And I think that Ohio State, while maybe it doesn't have that biggest of name, it doesn't have a Nick Vannett, Jeff Hireman, Marcus Baugh name out there. There are a lot of dudes in that room that could sit there and fill a lot of needs behind Cade Stover.
Yeah, you just mentioned a bunch of names there, and very, very good tight ends who are, I think most or all, still playing pro football or have played an extensive amount of pro football after leaving Ohio State. None of them put up the numbers that Cade Stover did last year in the passing game. Cade Stover finished last year 36 catches, 406 yards, 5 touchdowns. That's not, if you're looking at this on the Jackson Smith-Njigba, Marvin Harrison, Emeka Ibuka, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson type scale of production, you're not there. But in terms of Ohio State tight end production through the pass game, those are the biggest numbers you'd seen from anyone basically since Ben Hartsock 20 years ago. So now Cade Stover going into what is his sort of second senior season. What do you think? Where do you think he ends up? He is obviously going to be the number one tight end. Does he meet or exceed those numbers this year, or do those maybe take a little bit of a step back to, more what is a more typical Ohio State production?
I think we're going to see the numbers pretty close to that. Obviously the hope is that Ohio State plays more than 13 games, be it 12 games during the regular season and then a bowl game. The hope would be to play 15, which would signify you've gone all the way to the championship game. But with that being said, you can still sit there and have a huge tight end impact without catching the ball. I mean, are you really going to get away from Harrison Jr., Egbuka, Ballard, Fleming, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, so on and so forth? Sometimes you just got to take what's there. And with a first-year starting quarterback, the tight end a lot of times may be there for that little 5-6 yard pickup. And, you can move the chains by doing that. So, as I kind of talk this through, I'm not saying that we're going to see 50 receptions and 600 yards by a tight end at Ohio State. I don't think that is in Ohio State's DNA, not in the current state and iteration of where offensive football is. But I think we should see something pretty similar, because it is a nice safety net to have as you got a quarterback who is still figuring out how to process everything. And that's not a slight on any quarterback. That just has to deal with how much real world experience they have playing the collegiate game.
And we did see a decent number of checkdowns during the course of the spring. We'll see how much that carries into the fall. But, that is sort of a safety valve, that tight end sort of leaking out, or the running back coming out of the backfield. You might see a few more receptions for that tight end position than you did last year. The next two guys, you mentioned the 12 personnel with the one running back, 2 tight end personnel package. And that, who is going to be the second tight end in that package? We came out of the spring and it feels like it was a little bit of a horse race between Joe Royer and G. Scott Jr. G. Scott Jr. last year, 5 catches, 28 yards. He had the touchdown against Michigan State, and his teammates were super, super excited for that one. That came kind of towards the end of that game. Joe Royer only played in 5 games last year. He had some off-field stuff going on and some injuries, and he had just 2 catches, 10 yards for his whole season last year. Which of those guys do you think sort of takes that next step? Because it feels like they were both kind of battling and sort of neck and neck coming, throughout the course of the spring, maybe coming out of the spring. Who is it that you think kind of takes and seizes that second tight end role?
Yeah, that's a good question there, because let's not forget that G. Scott Jr. had a little bit of a momentary brain fart during the Michigan game and had a big penalty against him. It was Joe Royer that came in when Cade Stover got hurt in the Peach Bowl. But I think that with the whole offseason and everything else, that you just kind of have to reset the deck at that point and say, all right, well, we're going to see who's going to be the guy. I mean, I think that when you look at what G. Scott Jr. was coming out of high school, was a one-time 5-star, finished up as a 4-star receiver. He finally kind of has an idea of what the position is all about. And then you have Joe Royer, who is much more of your utility, your Batman utility belt or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of neat things that he can do, but you don't normally think about it a whole lot. I think I'm going to say G. Scott. And that's just based on the fact of just his longevity within the program and everything else. And I'm sure that he is somebody that when you are the 2 or the 3 last year, as McCord and Devin Brown were, probably have a pretty good repertoire in terms of what that chemistry is. But, neither of them would necessarily surprise me at the end of the day when we get to it and we see what they look like the first time they trot out 12.
That did feel to me, as I was asking it, like I was either being very nice and giving you a question where there was no wrong answer, or I was being very mean and giving you a question where there's no right answer, because I genuinely don't know which of them is going to be that next guy. So I guess I'm going to give you half credit there, because I think you got it neither right nor wrong, because I don't know that there's an answer yet. The next 3 guys, I'm kind of lumping these guys together. Cade Stover is sort of like in his own tier. Joe Royer, G. Scott, kind of the next tier, where those are going to be probably the next guys out there. And then there's 3 other guys, Sam Hart, Bennett Christian, and Jelani Thurman. And those guys have been, Hart's been around for a while. Bennett Christian last year was his freshman year. Neither of them caught a pass last year. And then Jelani Thurman shows up in the spring. And, tell me if I'm crazy here, Kevin. I will be the one who takes a stand here. Jelani Thurman has the most receiving yards of those three guys this season, and Jelani Thurman has the most receiving yards of those three guys in his career. Your thoughts?
Much as it pains me to agree with you, I have to agree with you because I think that Jelani Thurman is just kind of different than most of the tight ends that Ohio State traditionally brings in. So answering the second part of that for, the career path, I think that one is a pretty safe bet. Now for this year, that one may be a little bit more dicey, but everything that we saw out of Jelani Thurman this offseason was very impressive. Again, he's never gone against an opponent that wasn't wearing either a red or white Ohio State practice jersey. I mean, you don't know what you don't know until you realize it, and he probably doesn't realize it yet. Sam Hart has not necessarily had a chance to really break out yet. He's been kind of mired on the depth chart, and Bennett Christian's 1 year into a program. He was, highly regarded coming out of high school as well. Honestly, it could just come down to who has the opportunity to have the first big game, and can they sit there and ride that hot hand and stay there. But I think if we rephrase the question, is Jelani Thurman your third tight end? No, not September 1. No, not September 30th. But by mid-October, you don't know, and that's not saying anything against any of the other guys. And let's just throw walk-on Patrick Gerd in there, because we know that our compatriot, not our friend, but our compatriot Tony Gerdeman is a big Patrick Gerd fan. There are a lot of bodies there, but I think at the end of it all, Jelani Thurman is probably the guy with the highest ceiling. But you look at Hart and you look at Christian, and those guys at least have a year and 2 years respectively within the program.
And I do want to sort of set expectations there. When I'm talking about Jelani Thurman being potentially ahead of those guys in terms of receptions or yards, I'm talking like 4 or 5 receptions and 80 yards or 60 yards or something like that. I'm not expecting 300 yards out of him this year. That's, as a true freshman, as a tight end, and also as a true freshman, and also as, maybe the fourth guy on that depth chart if everyone's healthy. You got to kind of temper expectations a little bit. But if you do see him, maybe jumping over a couple people on the depth chart at some point this fall, that's probably a pretty good indication that he's going to be an impact player for them moving forward. You mentioned Patrick Gerd. We need to hit on him, but also want to hit on Zach Herbstreit. I guess the question is, they had Mitch Rossi last year, and Mitch Rossi kind of played that fullback role. And I know they're sort of hoping that they have someone to fill that fullback role, the sort of more fullback blocking, offline tight end spot. Who do you think fills that role, or do you think they know? Because I feel like they have some candidates, but I don't know that they necessarily are super confident that they know who that guy is going to be this year if they have one on the roster.
Yeah, you don't know once again until you're in this situation and sink or swim, and to kind of see how it works out. I mean, obviously, you do have these guys that you want to look at in that type of role, especially until Ohio State is able to prove that it can execute at a higher level in short yardage, in goal line, some places where Ohio State has had some issues over the last couple of years. So I don't know if I'm ready to sit there and say, well, it's going to be Patrick Gerd. Oh, it's going to be Zach Herbstreit. I mean, these are guys that are getting the looks there. I mean, obviously not right now because we're not in spring football anymore, but your mission. This is what you're tasked with. We want you to be this guy. This is what we would like you to do. And, I think time is going to tell at that point. I mean, it would be, in a perfect world, Ohio State wouldn't necessarily have to worry about dialing up the 80s or anything like that, and just be able to get enough of a push to convert on a 3rd and 1. But in the world we live in right now, that hasn't necessarily been automatic or even close to automatic. So they better have a plan.
Yeah, and what is that plan going to be? Well, we will all find out together over the course of the spring or the summer, and then, of course, heading into fall camp. Going to be a very interesting year as Ohio State has quarterback battle to shake out, some offensive line spots that are maybe not 100% in stone, and some other potentially interesting additions to the team coming. via the transfer portal and heading into fall camp. And then as the true freshmen, you may have seen on Twitter, the true freshmen are starting to arrive on campus at Ohio State. So the 2023 football season really starting to gear up very slowly, but we are getting there. That number at the start of the podcast keeps getting smaller every day. So that's a good sign. There's also a bunch of other stuff going on at BuckeyeHuddle.com this week. Kevin and Tony and Mark were at the Under Armour Next camp all weekend, covering some really, really top prospects, big targets for Ohio State, as well as some current commitments for Ohio State. You can find a photo gallery. You can find Tony has written in What I Know, What I Think, What I Wonder column, one of the most popular features on the site about that. Lots of just great reporting. We have lots of stuff going on there about summer visits and some interesting hypotheticals on 3 past Ohio State players you might be interested in adding to this year's team. I'll spot you Orlando Pace, and then you can fill the last 2 in on your own. But I think there's some interesting thoughts there on that one. So if you want to be a part of some of those conversations and be a part of seeing all the stuff that these guys learned over the weekend at that Under Armour camp, you can do that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. It's all on our Huddle board, which is exclusive to our members. Great content there, really good information, really fun community, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.